Michael Spears, a powerful and wealthy businessman, had everything he could ever want. A successful empire, a beautiful wife, and a life full of luxury. But fate has a way of throwing unexpected twists at even the most untouchable. One moment, he was dining with his wife, Jane Spears, and his longtime friend and business partner, Samuel Cole, and the next, everything went dark. When Michael awoke, he was trapped in a terrifying situation, lying in a confined, padded space. He could barely move, and the air around him was suffocating. His heart raced with panic as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. He could feel his body alive and breathing, but his mind was struggling to catch up. Where was he? How had he ended up here? The last few days felt like a blur, and he couldn't remember how he'd gotten in this tight, claustrophobic box. He tried to scream, to bang on the walls of his prison, but his body wouldn't cooperate. Fear crept in as he realized he might be buried alive. The voices outside only made it worse. A deep voice, Father Joe Martin's, echoed through the darkness. A great loss for all of us. Michael recognized the voice of the parish priest. He was at his own funeral. But how could this be? He was alive. He could feel his heart beat, his chest rise and fall with each breath. Had they made a mistake? Or worse, had someone planned this? Before he could process the shock, a familiar voice broke through his thoughts. It was Jane. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice trembling with grief. Michael clenched his fists, his mind racing. He'd known Jane for over 2 decades. They had built an empire together, but now in her voice, he heard something that chilled him. Her sorrow was fake. It didn't take long for her to prove it. "It's been such a shock," she continued. "The doctor said it was a heart attack. Who would have thought a man as strong as Michael?" Her voice broke, but it sounded too perfect, too rehearsed. Michael wanted to shout at her, to make her hear him, to tell her he was alive. But his body still wouldn't obey. Then came the moment that shattered his world. A second voice, familiar yet horrifying, whispered in the darkness. "Samuel." "It worked," he murmured. "No one suspects anything." Michael's blood ran cold. Samuel, his best friend, was having an affair with Jane. They were not only betraying him, they had been responsible for his near death. The betrayal was too much. He had trusted them both, and now they were the ones who had put him in this nightmare. As the funeral ceremony went on, Michael struggled with the emotions swirling inside him. Anger, hurt, fear. How had they managed to fool everyone? What had they done to him? And most importantly, how would he escape this grave he was buried in? The hours felt like days as the weight of the earth above him grew heavier. Michael thought he was going to die in this dark, confined space, alone and forgotten. But then, something miraculous happened. He heard a sound, shovels scraping against the wooden lid of his coffin. A voice, a young woman's voice, pierced the silence. "Did you hear that?" she said. Something moved inside. Her companion, an older man, dismissed her. "You're imagining things. The dead don't move. Finish covering the grave." But then the sound came again, this time louder. Michael gathered every ounce of strength left in him and pounded on the lid of the coffin. It was his only chance. The digging stopped, and the woman screamed. "There's someone alive in there." Hope surged through Michael's chest as the earth was removed, and the lid finally opened, letting in the cool evening air. The light from the outside world flooded in, and for the first time since he'd woken up, Michael could breathe. 2 figures, Anna, the young woman, and Tom, the gravedigger, helped him out of the grave. Though weak and disoriented, Michael was alive. "I need medical attention," Michael whispered, shivering. Anna, a 28-year-old psychologist, quickly assessed his condition. "He's weak, but he'll be okay for now," she said. "We need to get him somewhere safe." Tom, an older man, was less sure. "We can't take him to a hospital. The newspapers would go crazy." Michael shook his head weakly. "Oh, not the hospital, Jane. And Samuel, they did this. They planned it." The revelation hit Anna and Tom hard, but Anna took charge. "Let's get him to the cabin. He'll be safe there for now. Tom and Anna helped Michael into an old truck, driving through the night to a secluded cabin in the woods. As they arrived, Michael was exhausted, both physically and mentally. He collapsed into a chair near the fireplace, and Anna, ever the professional, made him a hot meal and examined his condition. She concluded that while he was dehydrated and weak, he was not in immediate danger. As he ate, Michael began to tell them his story, about his life, his empire, his trust in Jane and Samuel. "I never suspected," he said, his voice breaking. "I trusted them completely." Anna listened intently, asking gentle questions to help him process the pain. Tom stayed silent, his anger palpable. "The last thing I remember before waking up in that coffin," Michael continued, "was dinner at home. Jane had made my favorite dish. Samuel was there just like always. I felt dizzy after eating. I thought it was the wine." "They poisoned you," Tom muttered, his voice dark. Anna shot him a warning glance, but Michael nodded. "It seems that way." Michael's survival had been a miracle, but it was clear that his life, as he knew it, was over. What had happened to him would change everything. He was alive, but his world had fallen apart. Now he needed to uncover the truth, and when he did, those who had betrayed him would pay. They must have used something to simulate a heart attack, Michael thought. Jane had always been fascinated with medicine, even studying it for a while before shifting to business. As the night went on, Michael opened up more about his life. He spoke of the company he had built, the millions he had earned, and the properties that were now all in Jane's hands. "I need to get my life back," Michael said, his voice full of determination. "I can't let them get away with this." Anna, however, warned of the danger in rushing things. "Mr. Spears, I understand your desire for justice, but we must be careful. Legally, you're dead. If Jane and Samuel find out you're alive, they might try to finish what they started." Her words hung heavily in the air. The tension broke when Anna's phone rang. "Yes." "Oh my God, are you sure?" Her voice trembled with alarm. After hanging up, she turned to the others, her face grim. "It was my colleague from the orphanage. They saw on the news that the police are looking for a grave robber. Someone reported suspicious activity at the cemetery tonight." Michael's face went pale. "It must have been Jane. Maybe she came to check." "We have to get out of here," Tom interrupted. "If the police start investigating, they'll eventually find us. We need to move." Anna nodded, her mind working fast. "I know a place. A friend of mine has an abandoned country house a few hours away. We can take you there while we figure out what to do next." Michael looked at them, gratitude and determination in his eyes. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you for this." "You owe us nothing," Anna replied with a soft smile. "But if you want to thank us, help us expose those criminals." As they hurried to prepare for the trip, Michael couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of his situation. Just hours ago, he was lying in a grave, betrayed and left for dead. Now, though still in danger, he had found unexpected allies. But a question lingered in his mind. Who else could he trust in a world where his wife and best friend had conspired to kill him? Who else might be involved in this deception? As Tom's truck drove away from the cabin into the dark night, Michael vowed to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The battle for his life and legacy had just begun. By dawn, they arrived at the abandoned country house. Though neglected, it offered refuge away from prying eyes. Tom secured the perimeter, while Anna helped Michael settle into one of the less run-down rooms. "We need a plan," Michael said, his voice firm after hours of rest and reflection. "I can't hide forever." Anna, her mind sharp as ever, analyzed the situation. "The first step is to keep you safe. Then we need evidence, something that ties Jane and Samuel to what happened. I think I know someone who can help." Michael looked at her, curiosity piqued. "Who?" "My friend Harris McCall. He's my personal lawyer. If anyone can help us legally, it's him." Tom, who had just entered, frowned. "Are you sure we can trust him?" "After what happened?" Michael nodded, understanding the concern. Harris has been my friend since before I had money. He's never cared about my fortune. If anyone's trustworthy, it's him." Anna considered the situation carefully. "We can contact him, but we have to be careful. We can't risk Jane or Samuel finding out." As they discussed their plan, Anna's phone rang again. Her expression hardened as she listened. "It was my colleague from the orphanage again," she said after hanging up. "The news is full of rumors about what happened at the cemetery. The police are investigating, and Jane has offered a reward for information about the person who desecrated your grave." Michael's face grew dark with pain. "She's covering her tracks. If someone finds out the grave is empty, we're in trouble. We need to act fast." Tom spoke up urgently. "Every minute we waste is another chance for them to discover us." It was decided that Anna would contact Harris. She was the least known among them, making her less likely to raise suspicion. Using a prepaid phone, she would arrange a meeting in a public but discreet location. Before she left, Michael stopped her. "Anna, I can't thank you enough. You and Tom have given me a second chance at life." Anna smiled warmly. "It's the right thing to do, Michael. No one deserves what you've been through. We'll help you get your life back." After Anna left, Michael sat alone, thinking. Memories of his life with Jane flooded his mind. Their wedding, their trips, the moments of intimacy. Had it all been a lie? How long had they been deceiving him? Sensing Michael's turmoil, Tom sat beside him. "I know we don't know each other well, but if you need to talk, I'm here." Michael appreciated the gesture and surprisingly found himself opening up to Tom. He told him about how he built his empire from scratch, about the sacrifices he made, the sleepless nights spent working alongside Jane. "I thought we were building a future together," he said bitterly. "Now, I wonder if she ever really loved me." Tom listened in silence, offering occasional words of comfort. His calm presence was a steady anchor in Michael's storm of emotions. Meanwhile, in the city, Anna prepared to meet Harris. She had arranged a meeting in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, a place they would be unlikely to be recognized. Harris, a man in his 50s with graying hair and thick-rimmed glasses, arrived on time. His face a mix of caution and curiosity. "Mr. McCall," Anna began after introductions. "What I'm about to tell you will sound unbelievable, but I swear it's the truth." As Anna explained Michael's story, Harris's face shifted from disbelief to shock, then barely contained fury. "I always suspected there was something off about Jane," he said, once Anna finished. "But this is monstrous. I'll help you, Anna. But we have to be careful. Jane has resources, and if she catches wind of anything, we could be in deep trouble." Anna gave Harris instructions on how to contact them safely and arranged another meeting, this time with Michael present. Back at the country house, Anna relayed the details of her meeting with Harris. Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Having Harris on their side meant they had a real chance to fight back. "We need evidence," Harris said over the phone. "Medical records, suspicious financial transactions, anything that can tie Jane and Samuel to the attempted murder." As they discussed the next steps, Michael couldn't help but feel a mix of hope and dread. They were one step closer to reclaiming his life, but he knew the road ahead would be dangerous. That night, while the others slept, Michael stayed awake, staring out at the starry sky. He thought about Jane, about their shared life, about the dreams they had once built together. How had it all gone so wrong? A sudden noise broke his thoughts. Footsteps outside the house. Michael froze, fear surging through him. Had they been found? He quietly moved to the window, his heart pounding. A figure was moving in the shadows, slowly approaching the house. Michael's heart raced as he watched the figure approach. His hands trembled as he searched for something to defend himself. He grabbed a heavy metal candlestick, ready for whatever came next. The footsteps grew louder. Michael held his breath. Suddenly, the door to the room burst open. "Michael," a familiar voice called. The light flickered on, revealing a middle-aged man with disheveled hair and a surprised look on his face. "Carl." Michael lowered the candlestick in recognition of his former chauffeur and personal assistant. Anna and Tom had alerted him. At the sound of footsteps, Tom rushed into the room, ready to defend against any threat. "Who are you?" Tom demanded, stepping in front of Michael Spears protectively. "It's Carl, my former employee," Michael said. Carl, still recovering from the shock of seeing his old boss, began to explain. "Mr. Spears, you won't believe what's happened. After your supposed death, Jane fired me. She said she didn't need me anymore, but she forgot I still had access to her email accounts." Everyone sat down as Carl continued. "After I was fired, I noticed some suspicious emails between Jane and Samuel. My curiosity got the best of me, so I dug deeper. What I found was terrifying." Carl's voice trembled as he spoke. "I found conversations where they were planning to get rid of you. First I thought it was a sick joke. But then I remembered strange things I had noticed over the past few months." Michael, deep in thought, asked, "What kind of things?" "Secret meetings between Jane and Samuel. Conversations that stopped when I entered the room." Carl continued, pausing. "And Jane's frequent visits to a private clinic. She always went alone, which I thought was strange because she normally let me accompany her everywhere. This was a bombshell." Michael remembered Jane's words about studying medicine. Had she been perfecting a method to poison me at that clinic? He wondered aloud. "Yes," Carl said, his eyes wide. "I also have proof. I have copies of the emails and records of her visits to that clinic. But there's more." Carl pulled out a small USB drive. "Before I left, I set up hidden cameras in the mansion, hoping to catch something that would explain what was going on." Anna quickly plugged the USB into her laptop. The footage left them breathless. On the screen, Jane and Samuel were seen discussing how they had gotten rid of Michael and planning how they would enjoy the fortune now in their hands. This is exactly what we needed," Michael murmured, a mix of pain and determination in his voice. Tom, who had been silent, spoke up. "But how did you find us?" Carl smiled weakly. "After discovering all this, I was desperate for help. Then I remembered Mr. Spears had a trusted lawyer, Harris McCall. I contacted him and told him everything I knew. He told me to stay quiet and wait for instructions. A few hours ago, I got a message with this address." They all turned to Anna, who nodded. "Harris contacted me just before Carl arrived. He said someone trustworthy had crucial information." Michael stood up, walking to the window, his mind racing. He was torn. On one hand, the betrayal from Jane and Samuel was even worse with each new revelation. But on the other, they now had solid evidence and a new ally they could trust. "Carl," Michael said, turning to him, "I can't thank you enough for what you've done. You've risked everything for me." Carl shook his head. "Mr. Spears, you were always kind to me. I couldn't just stand by knowing what they did to you." Anna, ever practical, spoke up. "This changes everything. With this evidence we can move faster. But it also puts us in greater danger. If Jane and Samuel suspect we know something, they'll come after us." "We need a solid plan," Michael agreed. "Harris must be informed immediately." Carl nodded. "I'll testify to everything I've discovered, whatever it takes to get justice." As the group began to form their strategy, Michael felt a spark of hope for the first time since he awoke in that coffin. Maybe, just maybe, he could reclaim his life and make Jane and Samuel pay for what they had done. But as the night wore on, one question lingered in his mind. What other secrets were hiding in the shadows of his past, and would he be ready to face them? Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for the storm that was about to hit. Dawn found Michael and his team working relentlessly. Carl's arrival and the vital information he brought had reignited their efforts. Harris, the lawyer, arrived early in the morning, carrying a briefcase full of legal documents. His eyes were full of fierce determination. "With the evidence Carl provided, we have a strong case," Harris said, spreading the papers on the kitchen table. "But we need to move carefully. Jane and Samuel are powerful, and they won't hesitate to use everything they have to silence us." Anna, who had been reviewing the camera footage all night, looked up. I found something interesting. In one of the videos, Jane mentions someone called the doctor. He seems to be the one who supplied them with the poison. Michael frowned. The doctor? I don't remember anyone like that in our circle. It could be someone from that private clinic, Tom suggested, having been quietly watching the conversation unfold. Carl nodded. Makes sense. Jane always insisted on going to those appointments alone. Maybe the doctor is the one who helped her plan all of this. We need to find out more about him, Harris said, taking quick notes. He could be a key witness or an accomplice. Carl, do you think you could dig deeper into the clinic? I can try, Carl replied. I still have some contacts in the city who could help without raising suspicion. As they discussed the next steps, Michael stepped away for a moment, looking out the window. The weight of everything pressing down on him was overwhelming. Not only did he have to deal with the betrayal of his wife and best friend, but now he was tangled in a web of deceit that seemed to grow larger with each new discovery. Anna, noticing his withdrawal, approached him. How are you feeling, Michael? She asked gently. Michael sighed. It's overwhelming. Just a few days ago my life seemed perfect. Now, I don't know who to trust or what to believe. Anna placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. It's normal to feel this way. But remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together. Michael looked at her, grateful for her support. There was something about Anna, a quiet strength and kindness, that brought him comfort in the midst of the chaos. He returned to the table, where Harris had laid out a bold plan. We need irrefutable proof of Jane and Samuel's involvement in the attempted murder, Harris explained. The emails and videos are a good start, but we need more. I suggest we set up a controlled encounter where we can get them to confess. Tom raised an eyebrow. How are we going to make them confess? You can't just invite them over for tea and expect them to spill the truth. Harris smiled slightly. No, but we can create a situation that forces them to reveal it. Carl, do you think you could contact Jane and make her believe you know something about Michael's death? Maybe even blackmail her. Carl's face paled slightly, but he nodded. I can do it, but it will be dangerous. Very dangerous. We'll plan every detail carefully, Harris agreed. Anna, your psychological expertise will be key in guiding the conversation and anticipating their reactions. As the team discussed their strategy, Michael couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and anticipation. They were about to confront Jane and Samuel, and if things went wrong, the consequences could be catastrophic. But they had no choice. It was time to face the storm. Carl and Tom, determined to uncover the truth, began investigating the mysterious clinic and the strange doctor. Anna and Michael worked tirelessly, refining the plan for the big confrontation, anticipating every reaction and preparing responses. Meanwhile, Michael found himself combing through old photos and documents, searching for clues he might have missed. As he stared at a photo from his wedding to Jane, something in the background caught his eye. Hidden among the guests, there was a face that seemed strangely familiar. He froze. Anna, come here, Michael called, his voice tight with tension. Anna came over, curious. Michael pointed to the photo, his finger tracing the mysterious figure. Doesn't he look familiar to you? Anna squinted. Then her face drained of color. No. It can't be, she whispered, her voice shaky. I think I've seen him at the orphanage where I volunteer. He comes for checkups on the children. He always gives me a weird feeling. The revelation hit like a bomb. Could this man be the doctor? What connection did he have to the orphanage? The conspiracy seemed to stretch even further than they had imagined. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the country house, Michael's team readied themselves for the most dangerous phase of their plan. The confrontation was about to begin. With it, they had a chance to uncover the dark secrets that had been hidden for so long. Michael looked at his team, people who had once been strangers but now risked everything to help him. He wondered for the first time what his life might have been like if he had known Anna, Tom, and Carl earlier, instead of blindly trusting Jane and Samuel. As they prepared for the night that could change everything, Michael made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he would use this second chance at life to be different. He would value true loyalty above appearances, and never again take those around him at face value. With one last glance at the wedding photograph, Michael joined the others. The hour of truth had come. Night had fallen when Carl, heart racing, dialed Jane's number. The plan was set, and everyone was in position. Michael, Anna, and Harris waited in an adjacent room, listening closely through an audio system that Tom had set up. "Carl," Jane's voice crackled over the phone. It was cold, controlled. "I thought I told you I no longer needed your services." "I know, but this is different," Carl replied, his voice shaking but firm. "I've discovered something that could be a huge problem if it falls into the wrong hands." There was a pause, then Jane's voice came through, tinged with unease. "What are you talking about?" Carl replied, following the plan they had set. "I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. We need to meet. There's a warehouse near the docks. I'll be there in an hour." Another silence, then Jane agreed, though her voice was tight with tension. "I'll be there. And Carl, this better be important." In the adjacent room, Michael closed his eyes, trying to keep his emotions under control. Hearing Jane's voice again was almost too much to bear. Anna, noticing his distress, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You're doing great," she whispered. "We're with you." The next hour passed in a blur of final preparations. Tom secured the perimeter of the warehouse, setting up hidden cameras and microphones. Harris reviewed the legal details, making sure everything was above board. Finally, the moment arrived. Carl stood in the center of the dimly lit warehouse, bathed in the glow of a single hanging lamp. Michael, Anna, and Harris hid in an abandoned office upstairs, watching through a one-way mirror. The sound of high heels echoed on the cold concrete floor. Jane entered, as elegant as ever, but her shoulders were tense. To everyone's surprise, Samuel followed behind her. "I hope this is worth it," Jane said, her voice icy. Carl, nervous but determined, stepped forward. "I know what you did to Michael. I have proof." Samuel, his face contorted with barely contained fury, stepped in front of Jane. "What the hell are you talking about?" "The emails, the visits to the clinic, the recorded conversations," Carl began, his voice gaining strength. "I know everything." Jane's face remained calm, but Michael could see the fear flicker in her eyes. "Carl, you're making a mistake. You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," Carl replied, his confidence growing. "I know you poisoned Michael. I know you planned his death for months. And I know about the doctor." The mention of the doctor made both Jane and Samuel stiffen. Their faces went pale. "What do you want?" Jane asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The truth," Carl said firmly. "I want to know why you did it. How could you betray Michael like that?" For a moment, it seemed like Jane was going to deny everything. But then something in her cracked, and she spoke, her voice full of bitterness. "You want to know why? Because Michael wasn't the saint everyone thought he was. He had his secrets too." In the office upstairs, Michael leaned forward, confusion and disbelief flooding him. "What secrets?" he whispered to himself. Jane's voice dropped, full of hurt. "We found out Michael was planning to sell the company. Fire everyone, including Samuel and me. We found documents. Plans for a merger that would have left us on the street after everything we'd sacrificed for him." Samuel, his voice filled with pain, added, "Michael was going to destroy us." The world seemed to crumble around Michael. He had been considering a merger, but never with the intention of betraying anyone. Certainly not Jane or Samuel. "So we decided to act first," Jane continued, her voice cold again. "We contacted the doctor, an old acquaintance of Samuel's family. He gave us a poison, something undetectable, that would mimic a heart attack." Carl, following the plan, pressed for more answers. "What does the orphanage have to do with all this?" Jane laughed bitterly. "That was the doctor's idea. We needed to test the poison, make sure it worked. The children at the orphanage were Let's say, unwilling test subjects. Anna, unable to hold back, gasped in horror. Michael's stomach churned. Innocent children. How far had this madness gone? We did it to survive, Samuel pleaded, his voice desperate. Michael was going to destroy us. Michael's heart broke. He had never intended this. He had loved them, trusted them. Unable to stay hidden any longer, Michael burst into the room, his voice booming with anger. Destroy you, he shouted. I loved you. I trusted you. Jane and Samuel froze, their faces filled with shock and horror as they saw Michael, alive and furious, descending the stairs. Michael, Jane whispered, her voice trembling. This is impossible. Impossible, Michael roared. Is it impossible for my wife and my best friend to plan my death? Is it impossible for you to use innocent children as guinea pigs? The tension was unbearable. Samuel tried to flee, but Tom intercepted him at the door. Jane, realizing she was cornered, pulled a gun from her purse, pointing it shakily at Michael. Stay back, she shouted. Don't come any closer. Anna, moving quickly, stepped in front of Michael. Jane, put the gun down. It's over. We have everything recorded. The police are on their way. The next moment seemed to slow down. Tears filled Jane's eyes as she glanced at Michael one last time before turning the gun on herself. No, Michael shouted, rushing forward as Anna and Carl tried to disarm Jane. A shot rang out. The sound echoed through the warehouse, followed by an eerie silence. Police burst in, and Michael found himself holding Jane, who had been grazed by the bullet. It wasn't fatal, but it was painful. Looking into Jane's eyes, Michael saw nothing but regret and sadness. I'm sorry, she whispered before the police separated them. As Jane and Samuel were handcuffed and taken away, Michael stood there in the chaos, his mind racing to process everything that had just happened. The night was dark, and Michael stood in the warehouse, feeling both relief and dread. It was over, Anna had said softly as she approached him, offering her silent support. But Michael knew it wasn't truly over. There were still many unanswered questions. Who was Dr. Joe Martin really? How many others were involved in the conspiracy? And most of all, how could he rebuild his life after everything? As sirens echoed in the distance and the flash of police cameras lit up the scene, Michael realized his battle for truth and justice was just beginning. But this time he wouldn't be alone. The days after the confrontation were a whirlwind. Michael's return to life after being presumed dead had made national headlines. The scandal of the conspiracy to kill him had everyone talking. Sitting in the living room of Anna's house, which had become his refuge, Michael watched the news in disbelief. Renowned businessman Michael Spears, presumed dead weeks ago, has reappeared amid accusations of attempted murder against his wife Jane Spears and her partner Samuel Cole, the news anchor reported. Authorities are also investigating possible links to illegal experiments at a local orphanage. Anna turned off the TV and sat beside him. How are you feeling? She asked quietly. Michael sighed. I don't know. Feels like I'm living someone else's life. Everything I thought I knew. It was all a lie. Not everything, Anna said, placing a comforting hand on his. The good things you did, the lives you changed through your company, those were real. Michael looked at her gratefully. In the chaos of the past days, Anna had become his anchor. The door opened, and Harris McCall, Michael's lawyer, entered with a stack of papers. I have news, he said. The police have been questioning Jane and Samuel. They're cooperating, hoping for a better deal. What did they say? Michael asked, leaning forward. Harris spread the papers on the table. They've revealed the doctor's true identity. His real name is Joe Martin. He was once a respected doctor, but he lost his license due to unethical experiments. Unethical experiments? Anna asked, frowning. Yes, Harris continued. Martin wanted to create the perfect poison, one that could simulate natural causes of death. When the medical community rejected him, he turned to more unconventional methods. Michael felt a cold shiver down his spine. What about the children at the orphanage? Martin used his connection with Samuel's family to get access to the orphanage, Harris said grimly. He claimed he was doing routine medical exams, but in truth, he was testing different substances on the children. Anna covered her mouth in horror. My God! How many children? Luckily, there were no deaths, Harris said. But several children became mysteriously ill, and that's what the police are investigating. Guilt washed over Michael, even though he hadn't been directly responsible. He had been blind to the actions of Jane and Samuel. I need to do something, he said, determination growing inside him. Those children deserve help. They need compensation. Anna nodded. The orphanage will need support for both the children and the staff. Therapy, medical care. I'll take care of it. Michael's voice was firm. I'll use whatever it takes. Every penny of my fortune if necessary. Harris smiled slightly. Speaking of your fortune, with Jane in custody and the truth coming out, we've frozen her and Samuel's accounts. Your business empire is safe. Just as they began to discuss the legal and financial details, Anna's phone rang. Her face paled as she listened. What's wrong? Michael asked, alarmed. Anna hung up, her voice trembling. It was my contact at the orphanage. Martin was there a few hours ago. When the police arrived to arrest him, he vanished, taking one of the children with him. Michael felt his heart race with anger and fear. We have to find him, he said, his voice filled with resolve. Harris was already on the phone with his police contacts, and Anna quickly began gathering information about Martin and the missing child. As the team worked tirelessly, Michael reflected on how his life had changed so quickly. Just weeks ago, his biggest concern had been closing another big business deal. Now he was fighting to save an innocent child. Michael, Anna said softly, bringing him back to the present. I know this is overwhelming, but you're not alone. We're all with you in this. Looking at Anna, Harris, and thinking of Carl and Tom, who had risked so much to help him, Michael felt a surge of gratitude. I know, he replied, taking Anna's hand. Together, we're going to make Martin pay for his crimes and save that child. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city, they made their plan. The hunt for Martin had begun, and with it came the promise of justice and redemption. The next morning, the team was in full action. Anna's living room had become an operations center, with maps, photos, and documents covering every available surface. The air was thick with tension and determination. We have a lead, Carl said, rushing in with news. One of my contacts at the port saw a man matching Martin's description boarding a private yacht a few hours ago. He was with a child. Michael stood up. Where are they headed? The yacht was headed south, Carl replied. But after a few miles, they lost track of it. Harris hung up the phone in frustration. The authorities are mobilizing search teams, but it'll take too long. By the time they're organized, Martin will be out of their jurisdiction. Anna, who had been reviewing the orphanage files, spoke up. The child he took is named Matthew. He's only 8 years old, and he was one of Martin's main test subjects. His health has been fragile ever since. Michael felt a burning anger and guilt inside him, but it fueled his determination. We can't wait for the police. We have to act now. Tom, who had been quiet until now, spoke. I know someone who can help. An old friend with a fast boat. We can catch up to Martin before he reaches international borders. Do it, Michael said firmly. Harris, I need you to use your contacts to get us support once we locate Martin. Anna looked at Michael, worry in her eyes. I know you feel you have to do this, but it's dangerous. Martin is desperate, and we don't know what he's capable of. Michael took Anna's hands in his, looking into her eyes. I know, but I have to do this. Not just for Matthew, but for all the children who suffered because I didn't see what was happening. It's my responsibility. After a long pause, Anna nodded. I understand, but promise me you'll be careful. I couldn't bear to lose you again. The moment was interrupted by Tom, who said, My friend's waiting at the port. Minutes later, Michael and Tom were heading out, leaving behind a worried but determined team. The sea was rough, and the boat bounced across the waves, But Michael could only think about the child they needed to save. A few hours later, they spotted Martin's yacht. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as they drew closer. "There it is," he whispered. As they approached, they saw Martin standing on deck, holding Matthew hostage with a gun to his head. "Stop, or the child dies," Martin shouted. Everything came down to this moment. Michael stepped forward, raising his hands in peace. "Michael Spears, I know you wanted me dead, but here I am. Let the child go, and you'll have me." Martin seemed to think for a moment. "All right," he said coldly. "Come aboard. Just you." As Michael prepared to board, he exchanged a look with Tom. They both knew the risks, but Michael was willing to risk everything to save Matthew. On board, Martin greeted him with a twisted smile. "Your resurrection was unexpected," he said. Michael remained calm. "This has gone too far, Martin. Let the child go. It's me you want." Martin laughed bitterly. "You were just a means to an end. Jane and Samuel were the real architects of your downfall." The truth hit Michael like a punch to the gut. He had suspected, but hearing it confirmed was devastating. "Why?" Michael asked. "What could be so important?" Martin's eyes gleamed with madness. "I'm on the verge of a discovery that will change the world. A compound that can simulate any natural cause of death. Can you imagine the power?" Michael's voice shook with emotion. "But at the cost of innocent lives. Children," Martin sneered. "Necessary sacrifices for progress." Michael's anger flared. "Every life is valuable. Every child deserves a chance." As they spoke, Matthew, sensing an opportunity, moved quietly away from Martin. Martin was too absorbed in his rant to notice. Suddenly, Matthew broke free, running toward Michael. Martin screamed, raising his gun. In the chaos, Michael lunged to protect Matthew, taking the bullet in his shoulder. With Matthew safe in his arms, Michael knocked Martin down, and they struggled. The gun slid away. Michael, despite the pain, fought with all his strength. "It's over," he shouted, pinning Martin down. "The police are on their way." The sirens were deafening as officers arrived to arrest Martin. Michael searched for Matthew. The crowd was full of people, but one face caught Michael Spears' attention, making his heart swell with emotion. Matthew, now fully recovered and full of life, sat in the front row, his eyes shining with admiration and gratitude. Michael cleared his throat and began his speech. "Not long ago, I found myself in a dark place, both literally and figuratively. I believed success was all about the numbers in a bank account and the power one could hold over others. I was wrong." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. "My life changed when I realized that true success lies in the positive impact we can have on others." He continued with passion. "This orphanage, New Dawn, is not just a building. It's a promise. A promise to every child here that they are valued, loved, and that they have a bright future ahead of them." Michael spoke about the changes that had been made to the orphanage: state-of-the-art medical facilities, personalized education, psychological support, and activities to help each child develop their talents. "But this is just the beginning," he declared. "From now on, the Spears Foundation will work to build more orphanages like this across the country. No child should ever feel forgotten or worthless," Michael said, his voice filled with determination. The crowd erupted in applause. Anna, with tears in her eyes, joined Michael on the stage. Together they cut the ribbon, officially opening the new orphanage. As the children rushed in to explore, Michael was surrounded by his team. "You did it, boss," Carl said with a grin. "No," Michael corrected him. "We did it, all of us." Harris McCall approached with a folder in hand. "I have news about Jane and Samuel," he said quietly. Michael nodded, preparing for whatever he was about to hear. "The trial's over. Both have been convicted." Jane showed remorse and gave important information about Martin's other operations. Her sentence was reduced to 15 years. Samuel, however, will serve 25 years without parole. Michael processed the information quietly. Part of him still felt the sting of betrayal, but another part felt peace, knowing that justice had been done. "And Martin?" Michael asked. Life in prison, Harris replied. His crimes against the children guarantee he will never be free again. Michael nodded, feeling a sense of closure. Just then, Matthew shyly approached the group. Thank you, Mr. Spears, the boy said softly, for saving us, for giving us a home. Michael's heart melted. He knelt down to Matthew's level, hugging him tightly. In that moment, all the struggles and dangers Michael had faced seemed worth it. No, Matthew, Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you. You and the other children have saved me. You've given me a purpose, a reason to be better. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the courtyard, Michael stood surrounded by his new family. Anna by his side, her hand intertwined with his. Carl, Tom, and Harris, loyal friends who had stood with him through the darkest times. And the children, their faces full of hope and promise. Michael looked up at the sky, feeling a peace he had never known. His journey had been long and full of unexpected twists, but here in this moment, he knew he had found his true place in the world. What are you thinking about? Anna asked softly. Michael smiled, looking at her with love. About the future, about all the lives we can change, about the love we found in the midst of all the hardships. Anna leaned in, kissing him softly. And this is just the beginning. As night fell over New Dawn Orphanage, Michael Spears, once a tycoon obsessed with power and money, now a man transformed by love and compassion, knew that his real story was just starting. A story of redemption, second chances, and the power of unconditional love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to do good. But this time Michael would face them not as a lonely man at the top, but surrounded by a chosen family, with an open heart and a clear purpose. And so, as the stars began to shine in the night sky, Michael closed one chapter of his life and opened another, ready for the new dawn that awaited him.